The Eastern Cape Education Department has suspended a teacher who was caught on video canning pupils. Now, this video has since been making the rounds on social media, showing the teacher beating pupils on their backsides on school grounds. Joining us is Pila-sande Mkuzo, who's an attorney with the Equal Education Law Centre. Pila, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. Corporal punishment was banned years ago. It's almost mind-boggling to really just try and get an understanding of why it's still happening.
Afternoon to you and the viewers at home. Absolutely mind-boggling. I think the easiest answer is that corporal punishment has a long and deep history that runs across racial, political, religious, and cultural lines, and therefore making it quite ingrained and deeply embedded in the belief and the practices in society. I think a very common phrase that is used in households is spare the rod, spoil the child, which gives us an understanding that the only way a person can discipline a child is through corporal punishment. Where a child doesn't experience corporal punishment, that child is most likely to be ill-disciplined. But I suppose in the education discussion, it's always been a sense of the banishment of corporal punishment has resulted in reduced levels of discipline and a higher rate of ill discipline, and more specifically that different methods of discipline are not as effective as corporal punishment is or perceived to be.
So what are the repercussions then for teachers who continue to use corporal punishment?
So I think one of the things that we usually encourage is the reporting. I think that's the first step, the fact that these matters are reported. Most of the time, parents and learners are quite reluctant and sometimes deterred from doing this, from reporting these matters. But in terms of sanctions, there is the Employment of Educators Act, which puts this as an offence, which is punishable in terms of that particular act. There's the South African Council of Educators as well, which has a code of conduct for educators, puts in place disciplinary procedures where educators have carried themselves in an unbecoming manner where there's violation of learner rights, and also the Children's Act, which is in place with the intention of protecting the rights of learners.
What is the impact of corporal punishment? I mean, I would imagine that it would have an impact on the teacher-learner relationship.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the most biggest implication is the weakening of the relationship between the learner and the educator, which is a very, very, very important relationship for one, how the educator is in the classroom, but ultimately how the learner develops and learns in the classroom. We've seen how the effects of corporal punishment are linked to regression, antisocial behavior, mental health problems, cognitive difficulties, where learners have low self-esteem, and a whole other range of negative impacts such as trauma and PTSD. I think from a psychological perspective, there's emotional damage, like I said, the debt to the self-esteem of the learner, the feelings of actually not wanting to go to school, which ultimately leads to issues of dropouts. I suppose ultimately the negative outcomes on the learner's academic performance in the school.
Do you think that it's more prevalent in rural settings than urban areas? Or perhaps is it so because the repercussions may be more aggressive? I mean, the story would make bigger news, I suppose, if it happened here in Johannesburg.
I think there's a balance between the two. Perhaps in the case of rural areas, because of the context of the people living in that particular environment, there's always a parental support or a parental buy-in for corporal punishment, where parents were raised in an era of corporal punishment, and therefore they believe in this particular practice. When learners are admitted at the school, there's an upfront disclosure that here at the school we practice corporal punishment. This is how we grew up. Therefore, why would we change this? And because of the parental buy-in, the learners are exposed to that unsafe environment in the schools. I think touching on exactly what you're saying, where in urban areas it might be a little different because the media is likely to take it up more. But I would say that, like I said, there's a balance between the two, whether you're doing it in a rural context or you're doing it in an urban context. I think the fact that there's parental buy-in, community buy-in also plays a role.
Is it grounds very quickly for a teacher to get fired?
Absolutely. It's a criminal offense. SASSA does away with it. Actually says it's a criminal offense. In terms of the Employer Educators Act, it's a misconduct which disciplinary processes can be taken against. Like I said, in terms of the normal cause, it is a criminal offense. And in terms of the Children's Act as well, it goes against the spirit and the ethos of it.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time. Pila-sande Mkuzo is an attorney at Equal Education Law Centre, speaking there and reacting to the Eastern Cape teacher who's been suspended after being caught on video canning pupils on school grounds.